All right, hello there, AP Human Geography students. Let's keep learning about population stuff. Here we go. Boom. Look at this page. All kinds of new vocabulary to learn. All this stuff is related to the universe of contraception and population control and family planning. So the first two words, pronatalism and antinatalism, these are two overarching terms meaning policies that a country can use to either encourage more babies to be born or discourage babies to be born. And pronatalism is yes, we want babies. Babies are good. Our country needs more babies. Hey, Japan, I'm talking to you. Antinatalism is our country has too many babies. We got to keep our population control in check. Sub Saharan Africa, I'm talking to you. So those are two words that you absolutely got to know. Use them, love them, all that. The other one, contraception. These are anything related to limiting a woman's ability to reproduce. Or actually, there are some contraceptives for a man as well, but typically it's targeted towards women. And the big contraceptives that are out there are condoms, the pill, and birth control. All of these are, tools designed to limit the creation of life during sexual activity. Abortion is another term that's definitely in the universe of contraception, but it's kind of like the last thing of contraception, which is terminating a pregnancy growing inside of a woman. Currently in the United States, abortion is legal. You do them at these places called Planned Parenthood, and here's like an abortion clinic. But it's definitely still a very controversial law, and it might change in the upcoming future. But some countries are all about abortion. Some say never, never, never. And then this is another concept I really got to teach: the minimum total fertility rate. So if you want your country's population to stay completely stable, to never grow, to never lose, it would make logical sense that every woman has two kids. I mean, because men can't have kids. But the reason why the number is 2.1 instead of 2 is it just factors in that not every person survives until they get to the point where they can have babies of their own, but most people do. So as long as on average every woman has a little bit more than two babies, the population stays stable. Um, and a big concept sort of related to everything on this page is the more education women have, the more likely they are to use contraception, correctly use the pill, birth control, knowing about abortion, all that. So if women in your society have higher levels of education, you're more likely going to have less babies in society. That's generally always the case. So get some smart girls going on. There you go. All right, so yeah, make sure you know all these terms. Moving on. The Abortion Clinic of Nebraska, probably the only one. Planned Parenthood right there. These are condoms. And this is the birth control pill. Women take this and they don't get preggo. All right, so now let's talk about some migration themes here. So the economic structure of migration, it sort of goes like who migrates. Typically, the really, really rich people in your society don't migrate. And typically, the dirt poor people in your society don't have enough money to organize a migration pattern of their own. So usually the people who do migrate are the kind of maybe the upper lower class. So maybe you're some lower class person who has saved up some money, or the lower middle class people. So usually it's those people right on the edge of being middle class that are the ones who do the migration. I mean, I migrated to South Korea, and I saved up money, and I think I was very low middle class when I was 24 years old. All right, now this concept, friction of distance. So this should have been something in your vocab words, but friction of distance means that people tend to only interact with stuff that's close by. Like distance, the bigger a distance is, the more discouraged people are to interact with something. So, like, for example, let's say you want to go to 7-Eleven and get a Slurpee. You're going to go to the 7-Eleven that's closest by. You're not going to drive all the way up to North Vegas or all the way to Henderson or Boulder City just to go to a 7-Eleven and get a Slurpee. It's out of your reach. So, friction of distance, you do interactions with things that are closer by. And then the age structure of America's population. America's population, I think we are still I mean, I think we're stage four, but maybe we're at the lower end of stage four because we are still growing. However, if you divided America's population by ethnicity and looked at population pyramids of various ethnic groups, I think white people in this country are probably stage five. Like, white people are not having enough kids to keep our population steady, and most of the old people in this country are white people. But the Latino community and the African American community and the Asian community is probably stage four. But the Latino and African American community, they have much larger birth rates. So when you sort of factor in the whole country together, that's what gives us this early stage four. But if you just looked at, say, the Hispanic population of the United States, we'd probably be like a stage three country because they have so many more children and not as many old people. Um, and then remittances. So this is a big concept. It's something that I did when I lived in South Korea. Remittances are where migrants send money back home to their family living in their home country, but it's a country on another side of the world or something. And typically remittances are done at these places called Western Union. You're going to see a lot of these, especially in North Vegas. And it's just you're working in another country, you're saving up money, and boom, send it back home so your family can have money and live good lives. So, yep, that's what's up. Okay, so this is the migration in or out of California. So I applied to this. I grew up in California. And when people move out of California, where do they mostly go? Well, they mostly go to Oregon, Nevada, Arizona. But Texas is actually the number one destination. So Texas is a weird outlier. But you could definitely explain these three states having the most immigrants out of California because they're the closest to California. It just makes sense. And then the people that are coming into California tend to be from the total opposite side of the country. So they're like, oh, California sounds like a great place. Let's go there. And then, okay, it's not so great. Let's go to Oregon, Nevada, Arizona. So there's a lot more people leaving California than coming in. So that's pretty telling right there. And this is a cool map. Nobody lives here, so check it out. There's huge patches of America that are just darn empty all over the western United States and Alaska. But these parts of the United States are pretty darn full, so there's definitely a whole lot of people on our East Coast. All right, so here's some vocabulary words that aren't covered in the book. Let's get these on. Spatial interaction. This is a fancy way of saying why and how people move, why and how people interact, why and how people go places. So the spatial interaction of everything. I'm interacting with my car keys right now. I have them in my hand because eventually I'm going to drive somewhere. So yeah, the spatial interaction. Fancy words, use it all the time. And now let's talk about Ullman's three bases of spatial interaction. So I've really got a deep dive into this. So let's say you are hungry for a cheeseburger right now. And the first thing you're going to ask yourself is, are there cheeseburger restaurants in my nearby vicinity? So that's complementarity. And you're like, oh yeah, there's a bunch of cheeseburger places. Okay, great. And so once you've established that you can get a cheeseburger, then the transferability thing comes up. And it says, how far away is a cheeseburger place? What is the cost of transportation? Can I physically get there? So you'll probably have to ask your parents and say like, hey mom, can we go to Jack in the Box, or can we go to In-N-Out Burger? Can we get me a cheeseburger? And well, then maybe you might have this debate. It's like, well, I really like the burgers at Carl's Jr. the best. And then you'll talk about it. It's like, well, which place is closest? Like, do we really want to go so far out of our way? And then maybe your sister comes in there and she's like, I want to get a really fancy cheeseburger at some restaurant on the strip. And you're like, that's really far away. That also costs a lot of money. So transferability is where you'll sort of have a debate about what your ultimate destination is going to be to get the thing that you are trying to have the complementarity aspect from. All right, and then let's say you do decide, okay, the family's going to In-N-Out Burger. And then as you get in the car, as you're driving In-N-Out Burger, suddenly everybody agrees. They look out the window, they're like, oh man, there's a new burrito place. Is everybody else down for burritos? Yeah. Because you just saw this burrito place pass by. That is the intervening opportunity. That's this sort of alternate choice that kind of is maybe better for the complementarity choice and the transferability choice. So Yeah, that's describing it with a burger restaurant. But now let's describe it in the terms of human geography. So here you are a lower middle class, upper lower class dude in El Salvador, and you ask yourself, is there a place I can go to make more money and live a better life? And you think about it, and there's like, okay, well, nearby is Guatemala, it's not super great. Honduras, not super great. Mexico, a little bit better. America, that's pretty awesome. Europe, that's pretty awesome. Australia, that's pretty awesome. So you make up your mind that you're going to go to a better place. And then you go to the transferability part. You're like, okay, where am I going to go? USA, Europe, or Australia? Well, Europe and Australia are on the other side of the freaking world. America's the closest by. So my transferability thought is going to tell me to go to the USA. So then this El Salvadorian guy has started walking to the USA because that's his complementarity better option. It's the transferability closer option. But on his way to the USA, as he's going through Mexico, some guy in Mexico says, "Hey, you seem like a pretty cool dude. Do you want to work at my factory in Mexico City?" And then he's like, "Well, if I make good money, why not?" So maybe there was an intervening opportunity on his way to America, and he decided to stay in Mexico City instead. All right, so that's sort of how you can adapt all these terms to various situations. Okay, and then Ravenstein's book, The Seven Laws of Migration. It's a whole lot of generalities about migration. I think you learned a lot of these in your reading, but let me go over them right now. So, the generalities are most migrants are men. Most migrants are, as I've already been saying, these kind of upper, lower class, lower middle class people. Migrants tend to be between the ages of 16 to 30. And I mean, look, I immigrated to South Korea when I was 22, so I was right in the middle of that. Um, what are some other ideas? Usually, old people like hardly ever migrate. It's really hard to get old people to go anywhere. And another big law of migration is that once sort of the young man establishes himself in another country, he'll call his family and friends and bring them over to his same place. And I mean, that was also true with me. See, I apply like all these. When I was in South Korea, at the start of my second year, one of my old friends from growing up, she said, "Hey, I'm having trouble finding a job. Can you get me a job in South Korea too?" And I was like, "No doubt, girl." So I brought her over there. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff with the laws of migration. All right, moving on. Okay, carrying capacity. This is a big term. This is the amount of people or crops a region can support without destroying the environment. And has the world reached our carrying capacity? No, we have not. There are certain parts of the world that certainly have. I think South Korea has really pushed their country to the whole limit. There's not a whole lot of land left for our woodland critter friends. Um, but the carrying capacity of a place like Egypt is actually probably pushed to its limit. There's not a whole lot of more farmland or water to really go around in that country. But I think like the USA, like we can support more people. Okay, like maybe we could even double the amount of people that live in the United States, and we still would be okay. But other countries around the world, China, India, they're pushing it to the limit. Um, Okay, and why do women participate in the labor force? They do it for economic reasons. Every time you see a lady working, it's because she wants to make more money. She wants to have a better life for her or her family. So that's going to be a theme coming up in a bunch of questions. So just know economic reasons, that's why women work. And then the other one is the gravity model. This is sort of an inverse way of saying friction of distance. It's basically the same thing. But the way that gravity works in physics is all objects are attracted to each other. They want to connect. They want to be together. And it's the same thing when we think of interaction in the migration and population ways. It's the closer two regions are, the more interactions they'll have with each other. So something I always like to do to show the gravity model is I ask all my students in the class, who's ever been to Disneyland? And most students will say they've been to Disneyland. And I say, okay, who's ever been to Disney World? And some students will still raise their hand, but it's always less. And then I ask them, well, why does that make sense? Why have more kids here been to Disneyland and less to Disney World? And they say, well, Disneyland is closer. And yeah, that just makes sense. Um, And then when I say, okay, who's ever been to Utah? And a whole lot of kids say, yeah, they've been to Utah. I'm like, okay, who's ever been to Alaska? And like, no one's been to Alaska. It's the same idea. So closer interactions will have or closer proximity will have more interactions. There you go. All right, so the Cairo Population Conference. This is a big deal. This happened in 1994 when a lot of countries around the world were like looking at population growth rates, and we were gaining like 1 billion people on this planet every 10 years. People started to really freak out because at that time in history, like they were doing these predictions saying that the world would just get super overcrowded and we'd run out of resources, and we'd basically be in a Thanos situation where so many people on planet Earth would overwhelm the resources and all life would suck for everyone. But thankfully in 1994, people from all over the world came up with some good solutions, and most of these solutions have been met to a good degree. So they said that to better control the population of the world, to sort of restrict its growth, we need to have universal primary education for all children, especially young girls. And for the most part, this has been achieved. We then need to reduce infant mortality because the logic is if women know that their babies will survive into adulthood, they won't be as inclined to have families of 10 or more kids. So spreading out the healthcare to reduce infant mortality, that has been a big success in our world. And then reduction of maternal mortality. Women don't want to die when they're having kids, and it'll sort of more easily predict to people that your children will survive, your wife will survive. You don't have to have excessive amount of children. So that's also another really good thing. But then this is finally the antenatal stuff. Access to reproductive sexual health services, including family planning, counseling, prenatal care, postnatal care, appropriate treatment of infertility, and prevention of abortion, but the management of abortion. So at this population conference, everybody agreed to some extent that abortion can be utilized and that the pill can be utilized and that condoms can be utilized. So this conference was pretty great because everyone on planet Earth, even like the hardcore Christian people, were like, all right, we recognize that we got to restrict the amount of people that continually come into planet Earth, so let's use some of these contraceptive methods. So pretty cool stuff. All right. And then, you know what? I'll talk about this next time. All right. Peace out.